Hello and welcome to issue 14, where I purposely have caught Miles drinking to see how he reacted. Say hi,
Yeah,
Miles.
I'm down in the Barocca before this because I feel like I need the energy.
Yeah, so we're back with issue 14, where we're going to cover the Melos event that I just ran this last weekend that you heard me go on about the zombies about last time.
Yeah.
And Miles, you have gone out and purchased something that's going to be the main
Oh,
event.
mate, I've gone down a rabbit hole. I've gone down a real rabbit hole. Okay, I'm going to switch camera at this point. It's probably going to mess it up. It's messing it up, isn't it?
Well, only because for some reason the camera is reversed.
Oh my God,
But I don't know
that's
why.
not
But
that's not cool.
it right, so now we're unreversed.
There
Yay,
we go.
City Five.
Yeah, I've gone down a real rabbit hole. It was just like this off-camera comment they made, like, "Oh, City Fight Codex was good, wasn't it?" And I've never owned this book. I had the original White Dwarf that came in, but I felt like because I wasn't really much of a gamer, I'm not much of a gamer, that buying this wouldn't benefit me. My God, how wrong I was. Just flicking through it. I mean, even the first image that we see,
It's from the diorama
we have
page.
Kevin Downey's diorama page. Yeah, just flick. This book is so good. It's packed. I mean, it's packed full of like different materials. We will fawn over this in much more detail during the course of this video. But yeah, that little offhand comment just sent me down the rabbit hole all week. And well, we'll be talking about how you create a force, how you theme it, how you game around this codex.
With the influencer style. Well, is it the middle finger that's down as you're doing it? Or the...
And before the show, we were talking about this guy who's on some like a steak only diet, and all his videos seem to boil down to him making some variation of steak and eggs. And he always makes the same face whenever he's showing off his food as this.
Perfect.
I can't wait for that to be the like intro screen to this video. Me looking like a knobhead.
I think we did that last time with the Australia one. Oh, was that the one
Yeah,
before?
hey, with the kangaroo.
Yeah. So, have you had anything in the last week come up? Or should we go straight into the Melos event?
Well, when we in the show notes for this episode, you did mention they brought back Inquisitor. What the hell is that about?
Oh, so he's just a... I don't know. He's just a teaser within, like,
Where is
the
this?
500th, like, White Dwarf thing. That it's...
Oh, right, okay. I
Yeah,
haven't been able
something
to
like
get
that.
an issue of it. It's sold out everywhere.
Do you know what? I've not even bothered because I've not read White Dwarf in a long time now. I've replaced it with issues of Hobby Hammer. But
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think the media has moved on a little bit. I mean, we can talk a little bit about the White Dwarf later, but I think it's just a different time now. It'd be interesting if they did a White Dwarf online issue
is that
like
not a
we are
thing?
doing.
Maybe not.
No,
But
well, it's probably behind their like Warhammer Plus thing. I don't know, but just sort of like a serialized monthly video. No, I'm giving them ideas here. No, you can't steal our thing. Piss off,
that's what
Games
we're trying
Workshop.
to do.
So,
But
so Inquisitor, yeah, Inquisitor. What exactly did they tease?
it was like two sentences with Inquisitor. So potentially, like I'm thinking it can't go any further, surely, than just a rerun
Mm,
of the book. Do you know like how they've got
hmm
second edition is it
Rogue
and Slaves
Trader.
to
Yeah.
Darkness and stuff like that in Warhammer World? Surely it can't go any further
hmm
than that. But what it has done is got me re-looking at the Inquisitor books, and a couple of people in my group have started putting in motion maybe doing 28 Inquisitor as a
Oh,
like
don't do
a
this to
couple of battle
me.
report
Don't do
series.
this to me because this is another rabbit hole. Okay. Next issue of Hobby Hammer.
Is that what we're
We will
doing?
do Inquisitor 28. Yeah, that's what we'll do that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. I'll agree to that. I'll agree to that under
Yeah.
the premise of
Phenomenal old books, like it's chock full of artwork, and the Inquisimunder or Inquisitor 28. I guess niche within a niche hobby that produces some of the most outrageous converge. Oh,
So
I know, Max. Let's set ourselves another challenge, shall we? Let's do another inquis. Let's do another challenge.
no,
Let's.
no. Let's get the fantasy stuff finished, and then we can talk
Yes.
about those because we do an actual Inquisitor rather than
Mm-hmm.
a separate. Do you know, like say Inquisimundo
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
like spawned from the ammo bunker originally. I think like
Mm-hmm.
board when that. I think it's still up there if people want to go and search
Mm-hmm.
out the ammo bunker. Now that's using the Necromunda rule sets, right, to make
Mm-hmm.
Inquisitor warbands. And Inc 28 is Inc 28 using a separate rule set than actual
I have no
Inquisitor.
idea. I think it's more, from my perspective, it's like a modeling movement. But I have seen people using the rules from Inquisitor, but scaling everything down to fit in 28 mil.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that's exactly what we'll be doing. Is just
Mm-hmm.
like 3 or 4 person warbands, maybe a little bit more. There is a point system, but I mean it's an RPG, so just the guy who's going
Sure.
to DM it is gonna
Mm-hmm.
decide whether
It's going to
he
do
wants
all
us to
that.
do what. Yeah, and it's one of the most interesting
That's all
parts
I
of
want.
it. It's
Yeah,
it's
that's all I want
PvP,
to bring up.
Miles. Yeah, it's PvP RPG, which so it's
What's that
different
mean?
than as in like player versus player versus say like all having a single
Oh,
character.
right. Got you. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting mechanic in it where you play your like Inquisitor or leader of the warband, and at the
Mm-hmm.
start you give like a mission order to all your other dudes, and they've just got to carry it
Ah,
out.
okay.
So you're only
Right.
really playing one character, and then like
Yeah.
just not going through the motions, but sort of.
It's almost like a game AI, when you in cooperative mode and you've got
Mm,
like a squad around you. Yeah, and yeah, that sounds
yeah,
awesome.
exactly.
That
Well, it's
sounds
just
freaking awesome. Well,
really
if
interesting.
you have a rule set, please feel free to forward it. We'll put it up on the website, and it would be nice. Not that we're going to participate in this in like a big challenge, but perhaps we could do like a roundup at the end of it, and we could do like a big post on it.
Mm,
That's certainly something. But that's all I wanted to bring up because in the show notes, they're like, "Visitors back." Like, what the fuck? What? Um,
yeah,
a little
speculation at this
plug.
point.
So we've got courses coming up. If you look on Little Legend events, the one to really look out for is the 2-day Dreadnought Masterclass, or challenge, rather. You come along with a Dreadnought, we will fix you up. We will have you painting a professional Dreadnought by the end of the weekend. We also have 1-day courses on things like color theory, skin tones, and freehand. So if you did want to improve your painting in any of those areas, have a look on Little Legend Studios website under events.
Right, so my plug is actually taking the form of a post plug. Last weekend we had the Melos events series, which is the 5th Melos in the series. Last time, Melos 4, all the players decided to drop nukes. So I was like, right,
Of
another
course.
terrain build is incoming. Well, they've been mithering for it, and I was like, right, we'll let them go for it. And it tends to be a series where we don't put the next event until we know what's happened in the event before, so that I know how much terrain is going to have to be built before the next one to facilitate like exactly what's happened.
Right.
So within that, I had to do the terrain build of like 20 bunkers and stuff like that because we had an irradiated
Wow.
wasteland where you could only use tanks and rad hardened units like Thalax, Castellax, Secutari, things that would
Uh-huh.
like believably survive in the wasteland.
Yeah.
Everything else took like a strength 10, AP1, instant death hit with allowing no armor, invuln or regen, not regens,
Mm.
uh, damage mitigations. Unless you had heavy, then you got your invuln, but you were gonna like 50% of your squad's gonna die, right? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we needed these bunkers. So I made 20 bunkers in the last week. I think I talked about it slightly on the last cast, but that was actually successful. And
Mm-hmm.
along with the zombies that I got from Anvil Industries, who
Mm-hmm.
sponsored with the zombies for the event, and got them done, we actually got set up and got 24 people at the event from the 30 because we had a couple of late dropouts.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a really successful event. It was 4 games over the 2 days because we wanted a bit of a slower pace because
Yep.
we'd obviously made these beers, the Nipa within, Iron without beers,
They look so good. They look, and you know what? I know that the emphasis is to come and game, but after the first day, cramming in those 3 games, like I'm numb by the end of it. Like I don't want to interact, I don't want to talk to anyone. So yeah, I think it's the right way to go, especially as our crowd is getting older and falling into decrepitude. Asking 3 games in one day, it's a lot for our community.
Yeah, like we had some worry before. So this is a different topic now, isn't it? It's 4 games versus 5 games across a weekend,
Mm.
which I'm more than happy to go into. We previously
Yeah,
asked the
let's do
player
it.
base, "Do you want to do like 4 games or 5 games in a weekend? 5 games,"
Mm.
and it does always feel that bit rushed. I mean, if you just want to
Mm.
cram a load
Yeah,
of games in, it's very easy to just go to a random gaming centre and smash out some games with
yeah.
a couple of friends, and you can get a load of games in. Now,
Mm.
part of going to events is that social aspect of it and meeting people that you only get to see at events,
Yeah,
where
chatting. Yeah,
you
arm
all have,
wrestling.
yeah, and it's new people in the community that you've not met before that might have slightly different opinions than you, and like, oh, have you seen this book? Like, I've seen City Fight Codex. I've never seen City Fight Codex. Like, do you know, it's that sort of crowd. See how I set you up for that one. Um, yeah, it's just a different sort of crowd. So having that social time at the end of the
Mm.
day and midday, I think is actually beneficial versus like, because 5 games is from tournament days, right? Where you need 5 games to narrow
Mhm.
down to that
Yeah,
sort of Swiss
yeah.
style
The winner.
top table. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, we slowed it down to 4, and what that allowed us to do is have the more complicated like rad waste system where you could
Mm.
only see like 4d6, which comes from the third ed night fighting
Mm.
rules. And then we had a
Ooh,
round, like, so,
right.
say in the first round you added 3 to it, the second round you added 7, then 9, then 12 to represent like the lifting of the wastes. So you
Mm.
it was so to track across the event, it actually coming back to a point where we can next event maybe run it out of the out of the rad waste and into like a more like post, like in a more Fallout style, like
Mm-hmm.
survivable
Yeah.
wasteland. Also, it let us do the like a character progression system.
Character progression. I love. I like. So on like a gaming weekend like yours, I like simple ones.
Mm,
If because if you start layering complexity, I just can't keep that straight in my head. I often forget the bonuses I'm getting. So just like a simple progression, and it feels like all the games are linked
yeah,
somehow. And then when you take your character away, you might fight in another campaign. It feels like you can take those battle honors on with you if you so chose. Yeah, I'm a big fan of I think it's the days of like Necromunda, like seeing you Juve turn into a champion and then get nuked by a plasma cannon.
yeah, and then you have to hold a funeral for the Juve. Oh, buy him a load of expensive bionics. So
Yeah,
we didn't actually
turn him into
have
the Terminator.
the like the death tables or anything like that in it, because I always think it like
Mhm.
you don't ever want to penalize the losers. You want to
Yeah,
reward the
yeah.
winners a little bit, but also buff
Mhm.
up the losers so that it doesn't become unequal.
Necromunda again. You lose your first few games. Maybe one gets knocked. One of your characters dies. You feel like, oh, is there any point in me carrying on the campaign? No, I am. Words of wisdom being
Yeah,
dropped here by you.
but it also it unbalances campaign, and it does actually, like in a campaign system like Necromunda or Mordheim, it does contribute to people. Like as you said, is there any point continuing? Then it's harder for other people to
Mm.
get games across the campaign. So yeah, that's
Mhm.
words of
Yeah.
wisdom. You want to buff the losers and reward the winners slightly because they'll
Mm.
feel like they've won anyway. So we've got this character
Mhm.
progression sheet, and it's actually based off the Mordheim sheets. And we'll link this below. I'll send it to Miles to link.
Mhm.
So you've got boxes that you just tick, and anytime you get to a bold
Mm.
box, you get a new skill or a roll on the advancement table, which is
Mhm.
just like a random. Because we've found when we've had in the past, like you choose what you get,
Mhm.
and that always leads to very like insane characters. So
Yeah.
instead,
Like purposeful combinations. Yeah, I'm sure you get the same kind of combinations as well,
oh, everyone
rather
just
than
recognizes it, and
variety.
yeah, everyone recognizes it and just goes for it. So we did this, and if you have a Praetor, you start at the very beginning. If you've got a delegatus level, you start on the red box.
Hmm.
Oh no, other way around. If you've got a praetor, you start on the
Hmm.
red box to represent you like you already having been skilled up. And we gave, if you filled in the fluff section, you got an XP to start with. If you posted a picture of your
Uh,
character, you got an
uh-huh.
XP to start with. So we got lots of like these headshots of the characters. And if you
Uh-huh.
named your character, you got an XP. So there was like
Awesome.
a minimum level of effort that was rewarded, and then it was on table. But it resulted in like
Hmm.
sort of there was like a mad scramble to get pictures on the character sheet, and then a few people that were like, "I've not got access to a printer, and it's the day before the event. Can I just draw something?" And it was like, "Well, it qualifies." So we weren't going to be like
Yeah,
exclusionary with
absolutely.
it, but
Uh-huh.
it's
A little stick man with
yeah,
this big
exactly.
sword off the side. Awesome.
I wish I had the picture of the stick man because I was actually quite pleased with it that somebody had thought outside the box rather than being like, how do I do this? They just
Yeah,
like sucked it up and just found a way to complete the task, which should definitely be rewarded, I think.
absolutely. Yeah, and some of my favorite pictures of I used to make my wife draw these like really pornographic images
What?
because
What?
she's not a very good artist. So I challenge her. So like I wanted her to draw a picture of Whore Island, for example. And I'm not going to go into exactly what kind of like hidden coves there were there or like islets because I don't want to demonetize this video. But yeah, I used to get her to draw like these super pornographic because she's such an innocent soul. And you can see like these characters doing these in just insane things to each other but with a childlike innocence applied to them. Yeah, it was
Why? When you
transcendent.
said you used to get her to do it or force her to do
Mhm. Yeah,
it
forced her to do it. Yeah.
like is that because she's an artist or like was it just like
Pure
one day
boredom.
out of the
Like
blue?
there's only so much TV. I mean, we've been with each other for 17 years now, and there's only so much TV you can watch. So I to entertain myself, I come up with this crazy thing. Like I really cannot say on YouTube what these things were, but yeah, I just because she draws like a child, like she has that still has that innocence to her. So you'd have these characters doing naughty things to each other with that innocence. Yeah, it was. I like the juxtaposition between the two.
Right. Okay. Do you know what?
Where
There's
do we
not
go from
much.
there?
I don't know, Miles. I don't know. So onto the actual, like skipping over that section, we got onto the actual like working of the event, and it actually worked quite well. With it, I thought I was a bit worried that with like a lot of people's armies, because Heresy 2 especially is like
Mhm.
very infantry focused on what's good,
Yeah.
and what a lot is that you see at events is infantry based armies, which I really like. But we were just trying to do something off meta, and having like sort of 80% of the board not usable by
Hmm.
people's like normal armies. It was like, oh, is this going to
Hmm.
work? But with the slower pace, it worked, and we actually found we gave two campaign objectives. So one was taking control of supplies within the bunkers, where you'd find random events as you entered the bunkers. So like that's where the zombies popped up from, or hordes of civilians in the bunkers because I made civilians for a previous event. Um, PDF squads that were about to get overwhelmed by zombies, or just more resources. So we had that going on in the bunkers, and then like territory control for the overall event out of the bunkers. So he
Hmm.
gave us these two objectives, and we found that actually one side was winning resources, one side was winning territory. So it gave us this nice position that at the end of the
Oh, that's
event,
interesting.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it gave us this nice position at the end of the event where it was
Mm.
both sides could declare victory
Hmm.
and found they got something meaningful from the weekend. And in the events chats, they'd actually organised this separately, like the traitors
Oh,
had been
that's
like, we're
awesome.
gonna go for the bunkers and be really heavily
Uh-huh.
like infantry based, and the loyalists all seemed to
Mm.
turn up with like real tank heavy lists. So they'd gone for
Hmm.
this strategized push on one particular thing. both can declare victory. So it's good for that, and also it's not a narrative dead end to the event series, which you can get sometimes when, say, like, oh, loyalists have won 3 events in a row, and there's no, like, well, the traitors are on the back foot again, like they're defending again. There's only certain amount of times you can do that narratively until it's like, oh, surely it's just done now. But yeah, we had these 2 different objectives where you couldn't really get, your infantry couldn't get the territory control, and your tanks couldn't get the resource control. So you just had to choose which way you were going to go. And
that's really interesting because when you look at historical like sieges or say, historical battles, it's very rare that one side gets a slam dunk. There's always that element of some kind of victory claimed by both sides. So, like you say, it may not be territory, but it might be resources. So having that kind of like naturally happen without curating it or pruning it to get to that result, that's really interesting. How it's going like that. So I know I'm skipping ahead here. Just out of curiosity, do you have another Melos planned? When is that? When are you planning that for?
We've not yet got a date for it. It will be happening. The current thoughts is a couple of the players have been like, oh, there's these, like, you've had PDF troopers in the bunkers fighting off zombies. How about you do, and the Legions Auxilia have just come out. How about like you can only have an allied force of Marines or something like that, so that the majority of the forces are non-Marine forces, and we've seen it in a couple of events up to now. I think Harry Halliwell, it was run events at Swords and Boards doing just militia and solar and stuff. So we might do something like that.
I remember that. Yeah.
It's something that I've been interested in doing, and I like the narrative focus that's put on humans to give Marines scale. So it's very up my street.
Absolutely.
It's just whether or not Phil allows me to do it, or we think it'll do all right, basically. Without.
Can you put his email address below, and we'll get our listeners, our viewers, our issue readers to like bombard him with a load of abuse to go down that route?
Oh, I think he gets enough abuse online anyway. He seems
like the more toxic, the better. Like create a fake email account and just bombard him with the most horrible shit you could think of.
Perfect. So yeah, that's the thoughts. Not got a date yet. Maybe towards the end of this year, start of next year.
Okay, good. Because I want to get painting my. I say this so whenever I hear about these events, like, oh my god, that just sounds amazing. I gotta make the next one. So I'm gonna make a soft commitment to try and get my Krieg done by then. And if they're in any shape, way, or form done enough, I'll try and bring them up or over or across wherever you are in the country. Yeah.
Cool.
So fingers crossed for another promise broken.
Yeah, well, we have got an event, a fantasy event, next month on the 8th and 9th of... What's next month? Whatever next month is June. I'm not the dates guy. I'm the ideas guy. Yeah, we've got one then that's very much going to be... Well, it's a fantasy event, not in the same vein as in, oh, it's a rad wasteland, but very narrative-driven, where people are going to take trade caravans across the Cathay to make money, or if you're on, like, the Ravening Horde side, try and raid the trade caravans to gain the glory of whatever gods your force worships. So yeah, another narrative-driven event next month. That there are tickets still left. If anyone wants them, I'll force Miles to drop the link in the comments. That's £45
links will be in the comments.
Yeah.
Links will be in the comments.
Shall we get onto the main segment that
I guess so. About? Yeah, if we have to.
Sure. Right, so we are on to the City Fight book, which Miles has got in physical copy there, but I've just pulled one up on screen because I can't be bothered walking downstairs. It's harder to film an actual book, right? Unless you've got a great camera like Miles. Yeah. So what we sort of wanted to do was basically give a rundown of the book, but not a blow-by-blow of, like, this is all of the exact rules in the book or something like that, but why this book is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point looking at doing the blow-by-blow account of the rules because this is for a defunct game system. the rules aren't relevant now. Now, if you do want to go back to third edition, yeah, absolutely they are. But all of our listeners out there can read themselves. If you want to look into this in more detail, it's there. So, Max, you got into this book when it first came out, and I can see at the beginning the license is for 2001.
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
this
yeah.
released in 2001? Oh my
Yeah, man.
God! Jeez Louise.
It's really good. But even look at my copy online skips out that first page, but look at that
Mm-hmm.
environment. So this is one of the first books that I actually bought after like the initial codex that I'd bought for my
Right.
army. But that sort of picture that coincided with a load like the history books that I used to like, I don't know, look at the pictures of. Do you know where you'd get the Penguin Publishing history books that
Uh-huh.
would have pictures of this is this and that in history battles? The
Uh-huh.
book has so much art in there that in 2001 even when it came out, it really inspired me to do something in this style, and I think that's actually stayed with me, and it has inspired
Same.
a lot of stuff that I do nowadays, um, like just ongoing. So the actual,
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
yeah, the like, and that's down to like gaming and modeling. So we're going to just like do a little bit on the gaming side from the book, but I think the most interesting bit is a bit that Miles has got examples for, which is the modeling nowadays, because
Mm-hmm.
that combines both. I think the spirit of like the artwork and
Mm-hmm.
the sections in this book cover gaming, modeling, and actually a battle report, which I think actually, as well as
Yeah.
the fluff, but I quite like the fact that there is this battle report in here. So not only are there the actual scenarios that you can play that are quite interesting, but the battle report in here showing you how dense the terrain should be, and it's actually written in quite a narrative style, as well
Mm-hmm.
as having like the classic White Dwarf style, like not vignettes, like the top downs where they've got like animated little boxes with symbols. Yeah, are just absolutely brilliant. But then they have these fluff sections in there, and it sort of brings the entire thing to life.
Mm-hmm.
So that shaping how the game was expected to be played, I think was actually
Mm-hmm.
really important within this book. But you don't think so. You hate the fact that there's a
Right.
battle
Okay.
report in here,
Yes.
right?
So generally, I don't like uh, battle reports in codexes because I feel like it's a cheeky way of putting up the page count because you can double print the material. So in the Space Wolves, in the second edition Space Wolves
Mm.
codex, they had a battle report whacked in the middle of that. And it felt like codexes at the time, they would print them, they would serialize them in White Dwarf and then print them in together as a book. So they always felt a little bit lazy doing that. But this codex isn't very typical of a codex, especially of the time, because it's not based on a single faction. It doesn't need to tell you about warlords. It doesn't need to tell you about the special characters, outline rules. Rather, this is a narrative. This is sort of like an environmental book. So what this book is, it allows you to play games of Warhammer 40k in highly urbanized environments, city fights, as you'd expect. So it goes through the basic principles of the rules, how they interact in this very unusual setting, and they talk about the amount of terrain that you need in there. I mean, the rules section, unlike other codexes, come first and foremost. Normally, you'd have a quite an extensive fluff section describing who this faction is, talking about the law around them, and then you get into the rules. Now it's very rule heavy first. Then you have the battle report, and this is where I think it is a good idea. I'm a complete hypocrite of my own opinions. Having this battle report in here shows you, like you say, it's an illustrative exercise in how the game or the spirit of the game is meant to be played, or just gives you practical in-world examples of how these unusual rules interactions go alongside one another. Then the book also goes in, rather unusually, into a terrain building tutorial series, taking bits of styrofoam, gluing them together with only use Citadel PVA glue. Anything else, it will melt the styrofoam. You'll have a bad time.
It doesn't say that in this one. This is before those times. It just says
Yeah,
using
no, that
Citadel glue, we glued it together.
use this as
We're
but I
not as
mean,
cynical
really
yet.
nice examples of how you put things in. And then, of course, they give a little plug. You can also buy pre-made stuff. Um, I mean, with the amount of terrain that we have available to us today, I mean, I'm not really into DIY. Like, I don't particularly want to do this stuff. So having the ability to just like pay a premium and get it made, great. I'd rather buy the pre-made stuff. And then, of course, with the advent of 3D printing, it offers up even more opportunities. And even if they misprint, they can become rubble. And then you see, oh my God, I remember this being featured in the White Dwarf, the imperial city of uh, Sargrad. I'm not sure whether you meant to pronounce the T to Sargrad. I don't think you meant to. Sargrad.
Sarograd? Anyway, whatever it is, let's not get hung
Stargrad.
up on that particular
And
one.
yeah, but what I would like to draw attention to that this board and army was created by Warwick Kinraid. If that name is familiar to you, it's because you're a Siege of Rax fan, because this guy worked on some of the earlier Imperial armor books for Forge World, and he wrote co-authored the Siege of Rax series. So you can tell this guy has a big interest in this style of warfare and the look and feel, and just looking at it. Ugh,
Yeah, well, it's the atmosphere
feelings.
of the book. I think is really good, and
Hmm.
it's good source material because lots of the terrain that we have nowadays are these city fight stuff.
Hmm.
Whereas back in the day, Third Ed, the main sources of terrain was like Citadel Woods, Citadel Jungle for these like plastic
Hmm.
jungle sets. So the boards were much more naturalistic themed. Whereas when this book
Hmm.
comes around and introduces like city terrain as a big thing,
Mm.
that then
Yeah,
carries on
big
into
time.
the
And
new era through like Cities of Death kits rather than just City Fight and whatever Battle Zone City something, whatever they're calling it now, Sector Imperialis
mhm,
maybe.
mhm, yeah,
It sets a good
and
style that
we
can be replicated throughout up till present day in both
yeah, and
armies, basing, and tone of the environments that we play in.
mm, and when we're talking about building upon this, so we have the rules, we have demonstrations, we have how to build terrain if you're a little bit nervous about building all this stuff or where you can buy it from. We even have an article done by Graham McNeil of Black Library fame where he talks about how you theme your campaigns and the resources that are available to you. So taking, I mean, this is a genius thing that I never considered before. But instead of making your own maps, you can go on city ordnance websites and you can just download these schematics and you can
Yeah,
put like false names over the top of them. You can block them out. You could do a bit of hell.
living in
I
the
would not
past, Miles.
suggest this. I would
Li-
not suggest this under any circumstances, but perhaps you took one of these maps and maybe ran them through an AI generated to slightly tweak them to create your own city. Maybe not, but yeah, you could absolutely do that. And then the thing that Max is most excited about, well, one of the things Max was excited about is um, the oh God, where are they? I've lost them already.
what the
The stratagems that you can take.
Yeah, so this is, I think, actually not the best examples of stratagems I've ever seen. Do you know that in actual game
Mm,
writing wise? But I
mhm,
think the good bit about these stratagems are it was one of the first examples that we got of stratagems, but
mm,
they were really trying something and out there. There's like grapnel wires, booby trapped
mm.
buildings. Like those are the two off the top of my head, but now reading off the page, like
Razor wire, tank
adding yeah
traps, fortifications, booby trap buildings, hidden setup markers.
yeah, and as I know, they were the first examples of that you could have in the game. And rather than being this like trick that you pulled out at some particular point in the game that you decided at the time. They're things that you've got to set up before the game, and they're just like an additional points resource that's from a different points allocation, rather than being like, oh, it's turn 3, I could do with 2 rerolls now, I'll do that. So,
Yeah.
and they're really successful in the games. Like, we use stratagems. Actually, in Melos 2, 3, 4, we had stratagems in all of them. And they work really successfully, I feel. And it's with that spirit of these sort of like pre-game determined stratagems that I think that's how the actual system works best. Like, and can just be ignored. You don't require them to play these city fight missions, but they work really well. Another thing that I think is really good. Yeah, well, I'll just say, yeah, the diorama. Let's go to the diorama.
So I'm trying to flick through this book. I don't want to like give every single page away in this. So I'm trying to flick back and forth between artwork.
Yeah, so the diorama is really good. The missions are really there's a bunch of them that are really inspired. I'll just get to the page now, and then someone can see what I'm talking about. So the missions can still be used in new game systems, especially utilizing the mission objective part of it just as an idea, and is really good for narrative themed scenarios. So one of the things that I've used a few times in Melos campaigns as well as on the channel is the Grand Assault mission, where you've got to tag different buildings to like make them under your control. The defender starts with a much bigger deployment zone than the attacker, but the attacker has more points. And it's to represent this like final escalade on a certain area. And it works really nicely up until like even current day, because the game hasn't changed that much. It's still using the same principle of a 6x4 table with pieces of terrain on it. So it's really good for allowing just new, or not new ideas, but a revisiting of old ideas. And I think this is one of the books that is better for that, especially that Grand Assault mission, but other ones as well. So yeah, I think it's a really good book that's worth checking out for everyone, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reflection of the time as well, because in this article where it talks about how you theme your force or how you do city fight campaigns, they keep touching on the Demon Hunters Codex and how they had to try and make sense of why demon hunters would fight certain races. Like, why would an inquisitorial warband fight against Tyranids, for example? So throughout this book, you do see that thread where the writers are, well, not worried, but they're certainly on their mind, like justifying, or at least offering up inspiration of how you represent city fights on Eldercraft worlds, Orc worlds, for demon cities, feral worlds, hive cities. So there is this underlying thought process of how do we bring the narrative that we've established into, like, how do we make it all fit together? How do we make it make sense? How do we make this cocaine-fueled orgy of a world that we created actually make some semblance of sense? And what I really appreciate about media around this time is things like the designer's notes at the end, where the writers, and a great thing, they actually credit the writers in here: Andy Chambers, Pete Haynes, Jervis Johnson. My God, 3 titans.
Yeah, well,
where they get to chat.
Yeah,
go ahead.
The designer's notes, I think, is really important in there, because they did it as well in the Vampire Counts army book, and there's lots of arguments online now about like rules as intended versus rules as written and stuff like that. Well, none of us know what the rules as intended are unless there's something like that designer's notes section. And I'm not really pro rules as written or rules as intended. It's just we're all guessing. I
like to know the thinking behind it. I like to again, Andy, Jervis, Pete, they chatted a little bit in here about their intentions behind the project, what they hoped to achieve with it. And what I found really interesting in Pete Haynes's portion, he talks about one big obstacle I could foresee was the terrain itself. I was certain that we had to provide some guidance on manufacturing terrain to make the game accessible to players. So these concerns were on the rules writer's mind. So you can see how those concerns directly led into the final product. And I really appreciate that level of thoughtfulness that went into these kinds of codexes, and hearing from the artists. I wish we had the same kind of feedback loop today to at least understand and process what the thinking is behind these things. Great book, great recommendation, City Fight. And all week I've been thinking, how do we take what makes this book great and then translate it onto the gaming table? How do we translate it into the armies we collect and paint?
How do we make City Fight great again?
How do we make City Fight live again?
Right, okay. Yeah, so this was, I think, as flips around from last week, me just gushing about it. And then you've like, oh, fine, I'll get the book. And then we're into you actually having to think about how to make these ideas come alive.
Yeah.
Right. So at the moment, we've got the Sons of Horus tactical legionary with a chain axe up on screen. So what was this for, and why the hell did you send me this picture, Miles?
Just a test piece. No.
Son of a bitch.
Internal joke, though. So this was a test piece. This was the forerunner for my Sons of Horus Force. This was allowing me to try out different recipes, see what works, see what doesn't. But the base is what I want to draw attention to, because I always knew this would be based at Isfahan 3, where there are certainly areas of cities that have been reduced to rubble within that setting. And luckily for me, that a lot of my work does tend to revolve around shattered buildings, destroyed masonry. There's a lot of like urban environments that I've been dealing with in my work, especially through the Horus Heresy. Because you don't really want to be fighting on grassland. It doesn't make much sense why an elite force of Space Marines would be fighting on grass. There are certainly, I haven't got much opportunity to do desert. I mean, Talon will be a perfect opportunity for that. But for our purposes, our discussion, City Fight. How do we theme our forces around the city fight or an urban environment? Well, it can start at the very base of the miniatures that you choose to include in your army. So tanks don't generally tend to do well in city fighting environments. You see, on an average, less of them. It's mainly infantry, which feeds very well into, I guess, the meta of Horus Heresy 2.0 at the moment. I'm not quite sure about 40k, but infantry-heavy armies do tend to be the norm. The kind of weaponry that these miniatures would employ as well. Shorter axes, stabbing implements. You get very few, I guess, like large halberd-type weapons or weapons that require like a big swing, because if you are in a dense urban environment, you probably need more cutting, stabbing, shovels, those kind of implements.
Well, I think it follows along with like modern warfare style weapons as well, because it's a lot of the terrain and like city terrain that we're going to be seeing. You don't usually see it like fantasy environment where you've got these spears, as you say, halberds.
Yeah.
Because it's more movement through buildings, which ranked up regiments don't do. So then those like fantasy-esque weapons just feel a bit out of place, I think, versus say like Enemy at the Gate style or not Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan style shanking someone in a building at the end with a knife. I think that's the sort of gritty feel you want to your weapons.
So perfect. That's exactly the reference I wanted to bring up, Saving Private Ryan. If you're struggling to imagine what you'd be equipping your miniatures with, think of that scene at the end of Private Ryan where that kid is begging for his life and that German soldier stabs a knife through his chest. Would a halberd in that environment do him any good? Would a big battle axe do him any good? No. Shorter, mainly like shorter stabbing implements. So right from the very off, theming your force comes in model selection, and it comes in the selection of weaponry that they employ. So fewer tanks, more infantry, shorter stabbing implements. Cool. Right from the very off, we have that on the go. Basing. Basing is a big portion of how we tell the story of where they are set. In order to show off the story of your miniature, it's the basing. Basing comes into this so very often. We keep talking about this and why it's so important to have really, really good basing to show off your army, to give off the context. How many times can I say context in the same bit? But looking at the image on screen we have at the moment, the easiest way we can theme our bases is buying pre-made ones. You just buy them, boom, job done. So this is from Unreal Wargaming bases, which possibly have the finest range of resin bases available on the market. Broken masonry, shattered, tumbled down, like rubbish on there. So that I didn't do anything to this base other than paint it. At its very basic, you can take Halford's car primer, black it up. Then you can use grey or various shades of grey from Colourforge, whack those on top in kind of like a zenith of the light, and then hit them, just blast the hell out of them with a bunch of weathering powder and enamel paints or oil paints. And it leads to like this really gritty, dirty, urbanized environment that's so easy to do. So at the very off, how to create easy bases, that's how you do it. Buy a pre-made one, blast it with oils and enamels and weathering powder.
Now, you said
Great.
enamels
Now,
twice there. Is there any reason
Yeah.
you're saying enamels at this point rather than oils? Because
They
I think
dry
I know the
quicker.
reason. Right, cool. Yeah, just
Yeah,
to give someone.
it's purely that.
If someone's only got oils, is that a problem? And would you just use the oils?
No,
over
use
the garlic?
oils.
Cool.
Use oils. Yeah. So the great thing with enamels as well, that they kind of come pre-formatted. So for example, we have this. Can't use that. Like this MIG ammo range that comes with sort of like light rust. So you take the light rust, you whack it over the top of your miniature. Bob's your uncle, done. Interior wash, you can use that. Whereas with oil paints, you do tend to buy like a range of oil paints, then you mix them up yourself. So if you are looking for sort of like pre-made stuff, enamels are useful for it.
Cool.
So that's the basic way of developing your bases. Just buy them. If you want something a little bit more developed, if you want to put a little bit more effort into them, we have an example of a dreadnought that I painted up a couple of years ago. And this was based at the Precentor's Palace, I want to say. So when you think of city fight environments, urban environments, they generally aren't military installations. They will be just like regular city centres.
That's street outside.
That's street outside. Yeah, look outside your house. It's these kind of environments that you would see these city fights take part in. So we're not going to have, unless it's an entrenched foe, like bunches of razor wire or sandbags. You can certainly include those elements in there, but you need to think of these cities as cities. Where people would relax, or they'd get coffee, or they'd throw bins out. When I was researching this project in the Precentor's Palace, something came up along the lines of there being like a lot of water fountains there. And that idea really captured me, how you can have maybe like a shelled out water fountain. So I 3D printed out like this little fountain for myself, cut it up, smashed it to bits. And I'm not sure whether you can get this on screen, but I'm sure you can.
Yeah, well, I'll just
little
zoom
fella,
it in on the actual screen,
sure,
so everyone sees it
on the
together.
picture. Yes. So what you can see here, there's
Switch to
water
your
still
face, you
coming out
fool.
of the. There's water still. There's water still coming out of the mouth, spouting out. And then I've had a lot of water put around it, and like you say, like that gunky, horrible water that's kind of like flowing around the base of the dreadnought. It's mixed in with the blood of the legionary that's trying to reach that melter bomb just before he's crushed to death underneath the weight of the dreadnought. So these thoughts on how I can represent an urban environment and how you can bring that sense of scale in alongside these miniatures, 3D printing is such a godsend when it comes to this, because there are so many free files available out there for water fountains, for statues, for little brick buildings, for just any kind of urban environment that you can think of. It's already available. You can print it out, practically nothing, break them up on your base, and voila, instant urban basing. You just need to decide what kind of urban environment that you want to represent. Do you want something more like the streets of Rome? Do you want something more classical, maybe like the streets of Constantinople? Do you want something more futuristic in nature? Maybe it's something like you see on Star Wars or Star Trek. Whatever environment you're trying to capture, just think for a couple of minutes, give yourself half an hour over a coffee, thinking about where exactly your force is set and what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
And then you can find these files and print them out, no problem.
Another shout out for that is like classic models and old models,
Mhm.
especially the ones that are in very like monopose sort of poses. I didn't want to say pose again, but monopose poses make really good statues as well because of the sort of like single planar
Yeah.
things, and it can
Mhm.
be like a showing off your old model that you've got, so it doesn't just blend into the force, but also it sort of captures that model is older, in that
Mhm.
that statue could have been there for 200 years, or I suppose in the
Yeah.
heresy it could have been there for like 100 years from when the Marines first conquered. Bam,
Mhm.
you've got an older Marine on there that sort of has this nod to an older time. So that's quite a nice
Mhm.
source of statues, I find. Um,
Mhm.
Now, when you say in the different urban environments, there's just certain types of architecture that you're then looking at, isn't it? And it tends to be either these cathedral cities, as you said, like Constantinople,
Mhm.
Rome, things like that, but also the more industrialized cities where you've got like Stalingrad is like the classic one, right, for city fights,
There we go. Yes.
and
Yeah.
it's all the ones such as like Berlin in 1940s,
Yeah.
early
You
1940s.
got conflicts in the Middle East as well, like Fallujah. They'll have a different style of architecture. You have, I mean, when you look at our kind of architecture, like 80s brutalism,
Hmm.
like all these big concrete buildings, imagine those getting shattered all to bits. Making sure that you have a very clear idea of your setting will give a much clearer impression overall of the kind of project that you want to create. So thinking about the architecture, thinking about the style, thinking about what 3D prints that you want to create for your force. So beyond 3D printing, that feels like such a cheat code. That feels like such a hack. Just find files for online and 3D print it. You could do things like newspapers. So you can take, hell, you can even take things like tissue paper, soak them in PVA, put them on the base, and write on them. It could be as simple as that. If you want something a little bit more hard wearing, you can take the foil from like tomato paste. I'm sure we've all
Hmm.
seen that trick with creating cloaks. Well, you can do the same if you put and banners. You could put those on the bases of your miniature to represent newspaper or books or the detritus and blasted out remains of the civilian population that's just scattered all over the floor. It could be as mundane as bins, Coke cans, because I'm sure Coke would remain in the 41st millennium, like little carbonated drink cans, prime bottles littering the ground to give
So
a sense of scale and context.
so this is something I was actually going to touch on in the terrain section, because
Uh,
on the pieces of terrain that I've done, you can make real good bin bags by, if you get some like actual bin bag material,
yeah,
and
yeah.
if you scrunch up like little bits of paper and wrap
Mm-hmm.
a square of bin bag material around them, and then just burn the top, it'll give like
Oh,
a
right.
seal, and it'll give
Yep.
this randomized shape within the
Mm-hmm.
bin bag. I've just got it up on screen now for everyone there. It's at the bag
Mm-hmm.
of Big Pete's as one of the images if you want to look at at your side, Miles. Yeah, it'll give this randomized shape to
Yep.
the bin bag that you can then put on a model, or say,
And you can even do cool things like bursting it and having like a rat run out of it, having apples and like all manner of crap that you put in there coming out.
yeah. On the newspapers, I found it really easy to, if you can digitally create the front page of a newspaper,
Oh, there we go. Yep.
and then so you on this third to last image that I sent you, Miles, there is an
Hmm.
East Col Evening News front page
Got it.
on the
Yeah.
bottom right of the building, and then just above that, you can see a
Uh-huh.
newspaper. Now that's the same front page, and then I
Hmm.
just went and filled with just random text the other
Hmm.
pages, so that
Yeah.
and then I stitched, just put a needle through with a piece of
Hmm.
string out
Hmm.
through the center and back in the other side to bind it together. And what you can do is then soak that in PVA, and
Hmm.
and you can scrunch it up, and it means that no matter where that paper folds when you scrunched it up, it will have writing
Hmm.
on each page,
Hmm.
and you can then weather it or do whatever, stamp it into the ground,
Yeah.
cover it in water, and you get a very realistic looking piece of newspaper
Hmm.
that just adds to that world, and then you can blow it up maybe for a poster somewhere else, which is what I've done
So
on
good.
the model on screen there.
So good. Yeah, exactly. And so if you want to bring up the Black Legion next,
Yeah, right, we're on there.
so if you want to bring up the Possessed, I think it was.
Yeah, cool,
Yeah,
we're on there.
great. So if you have a look at this project currently on screen, so these guys were modeled by a guy called Dark Sides on Instagram, and very luckily I've managed. He's commissioned me to paint these guys. But what he's done exceptionally well with his basing is set a tone and location. So it's a very urbanized environment. He has a lot of rebar sticking out of the ground. He has shattered imagery from the Imperial Eagles, vestiges of life before the Black Legion came along. I think that's an important thing to come across, that you want to show what was there before it was smashed to pieces, before it was destroyed, before it was ruined. I think that's what this artist has done really exceptionally well with his bases. But one more thing I want to draw attention to what he's done is include these little bricks. You could buy these from model railway stores online. You could buy these tiny little 135 scale bricks, red bricks. I think Max is grabbing them out of somewhere.
No, I'm
Yeah,
grabbing.
Max.
You carry on. I'll be back in a sec.
Oh no. So you can buy these little bricks that are absolutely perfect for, again, showing the scale against a marine, against a guardsman, against a tyrannid, what have you. And then if we look further into these bases, you can see the style of weathering applied to them. Because when a city is destroyed, ADB, I think, described this better than anyone else, that when a city is slaughtered, the amount of dust that's thrown up into the atmosphere is absolutely apocalyptic. So everything is going to be covered in a very thick layer of dust. Everything's going to be indistinct, and the movements of color across the base are going to be very homogenized. You're not going to have very like hard sparks of color here and there. Rather, there's going to be like this film of dust covering the entirety of the surface. So that's what we aim to do with this base, that even though we have different elements like the rebar, the metallic, the skulls, I mean, God knows, we use skulls like they're going out of fashion, like they're daffodils just sprouting up out of everywhere in this universe. But we've also made all these different elements, all these very varied elements. We've clung them together. We've stuck them together by adding that film of dust over the top of them.
So on the point of the bricks, you can actually from a few places get these brick molds that you can either fill with like a UV resin or even like plaster of Paris. And what that
Mm-hmm.
allows you to do is churn out, like, because you might only get, say, like 50 bricks in a pack, like the Juila bricks.
Mm-hmm.
You only get like
Yeah.
50 of them in a pack, or green stuff, or whatever, low amounts. Lots of places you can get these brick molds. I think I got mine off eBay for a couple of quid. And
Mm-hmm.
what that just allows you to churn out lots and lots of these bricks that we can see on some of the bases that I've done for
Yeah.
the terrain later. And it's allowed me to do things like on this Leviathan, just have those
Hmm.
sort of mixed in to create big brick piles that
Hmm.
can then be like
Yeah.
the rubble on the bottom of a collapsed building, and rather than just having like single sort of
And
like
it's just more cost
piece
effective as
bricks.
well.
Yeah,
If you buy the mold, you could crank out as many as you like, as opposed to just having to pre-buy them every single time.
yeah, exactly. And it's there's that way of doing it. You can also, if you make like sort of a brick pile and then get some
Hmm.
blue
Yeah.
stuff mold, you can
Hmm.
press it over the top of a brick pile.
Mm.
So there, and that's the reusable mold substances, the blue stuff mold. I mean,
Yeah. Hmm.
press that over a brick pile, and then sort of replicate those random shapes. And just by using different parts of that brick pile that you've cast, you can churn out lots and lots of like different rubble patterns that you can
Hmm.
put across a large area. That I think is quite
Yeah.
effective to just like throw in there as an example of how people could get alternate ways of getting bricks.
Yeah, and the great thing is, if you use the mold, they don't all have to be perfect because this is like a shelled out environment. There's a reason why that brick is just randomly strewn on the floor. It's probably been blown up somewhere and landed there randomly. And talking about ballast and things we can use at the base, because it's not only like these large central portions that we want to deal with, like the Imperial Eagles or the bricks. No, we need sort of like the I guess, rough texture. Now, you can either use texture paste from companies like MIG Ammo, or you can find, how to describe this? If anybody's doing any work in your area, you can find these big piles of rubble outside the house. So we mentioned this last week
The
to get free
dirt.
materials, and here it is, the great big. The guy did come out and say like, "Why are you filming it?" He thought I was going to like put a complaint into the council. Then when I explained what it was I was actually using it for, he didn't really make much of a reply. He went, "Oh," and then went back in his house.
Yeah, yeah, I can
So
imagine you got that response.
I can't wait to ask him, could I take a Tupperware and take some of his dirt pile?
I think I'd
Yeah, that's
maybe
going to be an
just
interesting
wait till late
conversation.
at night and then sneak round to the front of the house and just take it in your Tupperware.
Yeah, just kife some to just steal it. Yeah, I'm going to steal some of his rubble. But you end up with like these really nitty gritty, nasty dust particulates, which is perfect for the basing. Whack PVA glue on, of course, GW branded. No other PVA exists.
As it says in the City Fight book, yeah.
As it said in the City Fight book, yeah, whack the miniature in there. And the great thing is, if you do this after the painting process, the dust will kind of like fly up onto your miniature and coat the bottom of your miniature with this dust. It's not ideal, but then what you could do is take a brush, crappy old brush, a little bit of water, or maybe a Q-tip, again, soak it a little bit, then drag it down to remove it, and you get that natural dust particulate working its way into the gaps and recesses at the bottom of the feet. So like you say, what is the best dirt that you can get out there on the market for your miniatures? It's dirt. What is the best dust substitute they can use as weathering powder for your miniatures? It's
Us.
actual masonry dust. Yeah, it is. Then you seal it in all the same ways.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's gonna come back. It was you laughed at me for such a ridiculous two things last week, as like the best dirt is dirt,
Yeah,
and the best
it's
hobby thing
revolution.
is the dread.
I, I thought I was meant to be the talent on this portion of the show, but no, it's the sleeping hit in Max here.
You just need
Absolutely
the
knocking me for
random
six.
batshit things in the back of your head a bit more. I think is
Yeah, I just
you've
need to
got the random porn
wander around.
doodles.
Yeah,
But
I just need to direct it towards more hobby. Yes, so that's how you do the basing. That's how you set the context. One other thing I wanted to bring up is the feeling of fighting in a city in an urban environment. So from the very limited research that I've done on the subject and the books I've read, well, book I've read, and the many movies I've seen on this, as far as I understand, fighting within a city is quite a claustrophobic environment. It's not like you have these open spaces. You're walking through shattered ruins. and there are a lot of places where enemies can hide, and the sense of paranoia just screams up. And you're looking around you, everywhere is danger. Like those signals in your brain are just keep you alert and wired. That and every like you have a little bit of dirt like trickle down. Is that an enemy sniper? Like and you're constantly paranoid. How do we get across this sense of paranoia in our miniatures? There's a couple of ways. Primarily, it's through the skin tones. Now, a lot of my work concerns itself with the Horus Heresy. So I've dealt with a lot of nasty, gritty, horrible skin tones. Skin tones that are drained of color, they're desaturated. Skin tones of people that are on the edge of collapse anyway. So there's a big, big, a lot of tutorials available already on the Patreon for that, including this guy that we can see up on screen right now, where we've drained the skin tones of their natural, healthy palette and replaced them instead with sort of like greenish tones and really harsh magenta tones, and then like bone colors at the top of the highlight. So everything is bleached of color. Even looking at this front cover that Karl Kapinski did, the skin tones are desaturated, they're worn, they're brutalized. And again, on the Praetor that I've done, you have that scar running across the face of fresh blood, that he's taken some kind of nick or some kind of battle damage from the environment he's in. But he looks quite pleased with the situation overall. He doesn't look too bad.
He's got a nice little smile to himself, and he's
he
quite...
got a nice little smile. Yeah. I wanted to make sure he was happy in his environment. So when you're dealing with your skin tones, desaturate them, drain them of color, absolutely drain them of color.
Do you know what?
And we can even
one thing, Miles.
Oh,
You've got a skin painting course, haven't you? A face painting course.
I have got a skin painting course coming up in the future. Have a look at dates on littlelegendstudio.com events. But if you did want, if you're not in the UK and you can't make it, we have these tutorials online via our Patreon anyway. But if you can't make it in person, I'm there hovering over the top of you, and I can slap your hand when you make a mistake. And you can actually ask me questions in person, which is quite a cool thing. Like, how do I do tropical skin tones? Like, what the hell do you mean by tropical skin tones? And we can have that discussion.
Someone that's drunk too much Sunny D.
Someone who's drunk too much Sunny, yeah, I will be ploughing my students with alcohol as well during the course of the weekend. Another thing we can do with the skin tones is accentuate things like the bags underneath the eyes, and like the crow's feet, any scars we can accentuate, and weathering. Okay, how do we the differences in weathering? Now, in an urban environment, the bottom of the soles. So if you're dealing with Space Marines, for example, the shoes of the feet, or like the bottom of the leg plate armor, is going to be really heavily chipped up because it's walking over rubble, it's walking over like blown up plates. Hell, it could even be walking on things like mines that's just blowing up underneath it. I mean, that would be quite a cool thing to do, just show like a really harsh streak of battle damage underneath it. The fists are a really good place to accentuate the battle damage, because when they're punching through walls, punching through people, punching through tanks, and like picking up rubble, digging, smashing through walls, like the fingers are just going to be absolutely destroyed with battle damage. You're going to have incidental nicks on the armor. You're going to have much more weathering powder being placed on the top of the shoulder pads and the head, where the dust goes up in the atmosphere and sinks down. So these areas are going to be a lot more prone to development of weathering powder in those areas. And another thing we can do is represent incidental battle damage with like bullet marks. So you can take a knife. I've been loving this technique recently, but taking a knife, putting a really big fat, skim it across the paint, create like this almost like blood drop effect, and then curtail it on either end. Now, if you did want a practical example of this, this weekend, or by the time you watch this video, there's a Death Guard masterclass up where I talk about the different ways you can represent different marks of weathering on a piece. I mean, Death Guard is perfect for that kind of material, but you can see that from the comfort of your own home and try it out. But overall, whenever you're painting, there's one thing between making it quite a sterile paint job, where it's overly manufactured and it's technically perfect, but it lacks emotional content. when I approach my work, I try and put myself in the atmosphere, in the feeling of what this miniature is going through at that time. I know it sounds sad, but still, emotional content in your work. You want to try and feel like the level of oppressiveness, of claustrophobia, of paranoia that is typical in urban and city fighting environments. I think if you put yourself in that frame of reference in your mind, it will naturally leak its way into your paint job anyway.
So you're saying
So
someone needs to become paranoid, and they need to
someone
get
needs to be
into
really
like
paranoid.
method
Yeah.
painters. It's a completely new
Method
style of
painting,
painting.
yeah, oh, shit. I hadn't thought about it. Yeah, method painting, yeah. Just for me, if I have a couple of espressos in the morning without eating anything, I get really paranoid. Like those obtrusive thoughts, they start to win. So whatever you need to do to put yourself in a bad frame of mind, an oppressive frame of mind, do so. Or we could suggest supporting media. So Max, if there's nothing else you want to say about the actual modeling side of things, we could talk a little about like the inspirations, the like media that you may want to consume alongside while you're painting your project.
So there was just one for the modelling,
Okay.
and because we sort of covered off the, like I was going to bring up the bricks actually, and newspapers and posters,
Mm-hmm.
like for the style of modelling
Mm-hmm.
for terrain building, and because terrain building is one of my favourite things to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we've covered off those, but then I think adding little touches like signs that can be added, say like the front of Big Pete's calf, was
Mm-hmm.
one of my favourite things to do. Doing the murals on side of building that you can buy transfer paper that you can put through a laserjet printer, or buy it for inkjet. I just find the laserjet smudges less.
Mm-hmm.
Adding a mural to the side of the building as well as
Mm-hmm.
graffiti that can be added, and these are
Mm-hmm.
things that can be done in miniature on bases as well as terrain. I found a really
Mm-hmm.
effective ways to make the city feel alive rather than
Yeah.
just rather than just being rubble.
Styrofoam.
As you were saying, it's got
Yeah.
what has been there before. So
Mm-hmm.
adding
Yeah.
and even alive while the fighting is going on if the fighting has lasted for more than a
Mm-hmm.
day.
Yeah.
So yeah, murals, posters can be found online that you can download off Google or quite easy to make in different like with Photoshop, think Paint, if Paint still exists, things like that.
Yeah.
One thing that I found really effective in terrain building was actually making wallpapers of just making a small icon
Yeah.
that you
Mm-hmm.
could then print out as a sheet and cut to the size of your building. So you essentially say on this building that's up on screen now, it's the old Cities of Death
Mm-hmm.
buildings that are they're all 3 inches high. So you print a big strip that's 3 inches long, and then just cut out the windows and doors, having a
Mm-hmm.
base color of say like a brown over that, PVAing it onto the wall, and then weathering on top of that, so it's like got drips and rubble, dust. It was just a really quick way to add life. Like, I was surprised at how quick it was versus painting and how effective it was when I actually did it.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'd recommend for any terrain builders out there. It's just it was like an offhand idea that just actually turned out quite well.
Mm.
But that's all I wanted to add really was because we've already covered the newspapers and bits of bricks that I think were things that you sort of
Trying to suggest the life that was there beforehand.
yeah. Oh, final one that's just popped into my head.
Oh,
Glass. Adding how do you add glass,
oh,
shattered glass to a
great
model?
shout. Great
So
shout.
if you get a thin piece of acrylic sheet, a blister
Mm-hmm.
pack, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
or you can get it from model planes and stuff like that to do the
Mm-hmm.
canopies. If you
Yep.
cut that up, it actually gets quite a nice whitened effect at the side, as if it's like a bit shattered. And then if you put weathering pigments, you put those on after painting, but before weathering pigments, and
Mm-hmm.
potentially before oils as well, or enamels, whatever you're
Mm-hmm.
using. It can give that extra realistic step of,
Mm-hmm.
well, all the
Yeah.
windows are going to have
Shattered
had glass
glass.
in. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just a nice little thing that you can add a shard of glass
Uh,
to the models.
Another way you can create that is you take exactly the same plastic sheeting, but you put super glue on the top of it. You add a couple of layers of super glue, and then you take it off, you crack it, and it breaks up into little shards,
Oh,
and
so
then
you
you can
use the
scatter
actual
those.
super glue.
Use the actual super glue, yeah, and the plastic that you were using, it becomes like this flexible sheet, so you can flex it. The super glue will break off the top, and you can take it, you can break it up even further. You can smash it up into like little shards, and you can scatter that on the base as well.
Ah, there we go. So yeah, just wanted to add like
No, that was a
those
great,
little
yeah, that was a great
little
suggestion.
bits.
Shattered glass, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how you go representing the modeling side of how you create themed forces. I hope you enjoyed that segment. If you do want to learn more, jump on the Patreon. Why not? I will learn you up how to be a better miniature painter.
I'll learn you. Sounds like you're
I'll
gonna
learn
eat
you.
me. But right, so you were
I'll get you to
saying
draw a
about
little.
like
I'll get you to draw a
inspirations.
little. Yeah, I'll get you to draw little pornographic pictures for my own amusement. Let's see if we could create like a little cartel of it.
I think that's a different pay. I think that's an OnlyFans more than a Patreon. But right, Miles, inspiration. Where did you want to go with that one?
Inspiration. So, what do you have on the background? What kind of media do you draw upon? Because I've never been to war, thank goodness. I've never been to Fallujah. I've never been to these horrible places in the world, but I've seen cool videos and movies of it to make me feel like I've lived through this experience. So, any veterans out there, I apologize for that previous sentence. Right. Okay. So when we're looking at movies and references, I think one of the big ones, one of the obvious ones, is Enemies of the Gate.
Hmm.
So whenever I come to create a urbanized environment on my miniatures, I always go back to that film, mainly because I got a thing for Rachel Weisz, but more the cinematography on it is freaking amazing, and it's sniper warfare in an urban environment. So it's a case of we almost get to luxuriate in these bombed out areas in this urban center that housed people. That is now the playground of these two forces clashing against one another. Uh, and because they are dealing with snipers, we have long, luxurious panning vistas that we get to look at in this. So there's just like there's amazing visual imagery in there scattered right throughout the film for that. Another one, Saving Private Ryan, that we've looked at already. And even though it
Hmm.
doesn't really concern itself with um, an urban environment in the main, there is a really cool battle scene at the very end where they are going through a French town, which again, it's anything that Stephen.
You mean when they found Matt Damon and
When they found Matt
they found
Damon,
Private
yeah,
Ryan, yeah, and he's that's a really good scene for like the bombed out rubble. This is one thing like where it's piled up against
yep,
buildings,
yep.
and you have the sticky bombs of the soldiers that
Sticky
they've been running
bomb,
to throw into the tracks, and
yeah,
that's one of the
the
things I liked about
architecture, yeah,
the stratagems in the City Fight book. So I think
uh-huh,
there's sticky bombs in there.
mm-hmm.
But one of the things that they said one of the first things they had to send into Berlin was tractors to clear away the rubble, and I think that's one of the inspirations
Right.
of that. Whenever I watch Saving Private Ryan, like Enemy at the Gates, another one is Band
Mm-hmm.
of Brothers. You've got the
There
Quarantine
we go.
episode in episode
Yep.
3, and then the Last
Mm-hmm.
Patrol. I think it's episode 8. Are
Mm-hmm.
really good for different stages of the war's city fights and just buildings getting blasted apart.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
a lot of them is World War Two, right? He's
Well, yeah.
40k
So a little
architecture
bit
is a
more.
lot in World War Two, I think.
I mean, as Brits, we kind of obsessed by World War One and World War Two. And I think it's leaked out a lot into like our media and like things we write like this. Yeah, it's sort of like sci-fi World War Two relived again and again and again.
Yeah, like we obviously get bits of there's not as much say in the Vietnam War is much more emblematic
Mhm.
of say like Codex Catachan's featured in the upcoming episode in 3 weeks time, obviously. But
Yeah.
the City Fight, yeah, very much that World War Two theme.
Mhm. Yeah.
Can
Very,
you
very,
think
yeah,
of
very
any
much so.
sci-fi that you particularly look at for your influences? Because mine is mainly World War Two, but from
So
your perspective,
sci-fi, not so much. A more like modern perspective of it. Black Hawk Down.
mm,
I think there's some amazing visuals in that. Again, and I wish I could remember this media, but I very clearly remember a scene of like a cargo of, oh God, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like these vans that are going through a city, and the first van gets blown up and the last van gets blown up, trapping the vans in between, like in this kill box, in this kill zone. I think it might have been from one of those crappy shows made after 9/11.
Mm.
You know, the shows where they like really badly done. But I remember that scene sticking out to me. And again, like the sense of oppressiveness and having these big buildings either side of this vehicle, and again blown to bits. Black Hole Down, amazing visual film to look at in that regard. Um, as far as like sci-fi goes, nothing immediately springs to mind as far as like warfare in an urban environment. How about yourself?
Sci-fi, not particularly. It tends to be like space stuff that I tend to be watching sci-fi for.
Yeah,
But it's one actually that's really good in the vein of Black Hawk Down. Generation Kill, that follows Marine First Recon as they go into Iraq,
yeah,
is
that's
a
a
really
really
good
good one.
series that
Yeah,
can sustain you over much of a paint
mm,
job or build, because it's
yeah.
like 8 episode hour long episodes.
Mhm.
Yeah, really good, worth visiting for just for background chatter and
Yes, yeah.
and like
No, it really
explosions.
feels like you're a part of that world. Yeah. To like go back into ancient history, the Siege of Constantinople. There is a series on Netflix that deals with the siege, and we don't get many visuals, but the visuals that are there are nice to see. And if you did want to have maybe sort of like a pre-industrial civilization that you could represent on the basing, great for that. Like you have the frescoes, you have the art on the floor, you have the style of buildings, you have maybe like the carpets, you have the architecture, you have the feel of the city that you can represent, maybe like on a compliance mission or something of that sort. Um, then we also have, okay, a bit of a weird one to throw in there, but Lord of the Rings, The Siege of Minas Tirith.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you want to throw that in there. I mean, it's, if nothing else, it's
no,
just a cool scene
definitely
to
like
watch again.
Osgiliath in the Two
Yeah.
Towers as well as Return of the
Mhm.
King's Siege of Minas
Yeah.
Tirith. Really good, because you get all the rubble flying everywhere in
Yeah.
in both of those and
Mhm.
built up
And
against the sides of the buildings.
if you wanted to do a fantasy army as well, I mean, we don't have to keep city fighter just like sci-fi tropes. If you want to do a fantasy army that's besieging or in that environment, cool, you could do that. As far as media, more specifically around our thing and Warhammer, I think probably the best book for this is The Storm of Iron by Graham McNeil.
Mm.
Freaking love that book. I've read that book so many times, and it details how an Iron Warrior uh, campaign against a Mechanicum. I don't want to say it's not a forge world, it's more like a facility.
Yeah, let's leave it
Research,
at that because it'll spoil it. It'll spoil it if we go in any more
yes, it's
than just a
it's not a
facility.
forge world, but it is a Mechanicum facility that, with any kind of mechanical facility, is very, very, very heavily fortified. So you get to see them draw up the lines of conquest. You get to see the like gradual bombardment and the gradual move into this area. Uh, Really great, really great. There are
And
individual scenes. So the Night Lords trilogy by ADB, there's a scene in that where the Night Lords characters have to take down a Titan in that, and you can see how they're
mm,
scrambling through the debris and scrambling through the city, and just how much dust is kicked up by the death of a city and them struggling through this urban environment to do their thing.
so I think I've got a better one for you. Storm of Iron's a bit
Oh,
siegey rather than
it
he's
is.
got the
Yeah.
paranoia and the sense of enclosure
Yep.
in there. Necropolis for
Mhm.
Gaunt's Ghosts is
Oh,
entirely set
how did I
around
miss
a
that?
city fight and
Yeah.
has
Great
them
shout.
like going, as you said, going through the rubble, people getting buried as they work
Yep.
because they've been working in mines, people buried under the rubble, dug
Mhm.
out, and this mass scale theatre warfare of a city
Yeah.
fight. And I think this
Mhm.
that's one that I keep revisiting. I'm sure it's on. It's definitely on Audible if you want to listen to
Mhm.
it while making these things rather than just
Mhm.
like going for inspiration afterwards. But that's one that I return to. I go back to Gaunt's Ghosts
again.
at least once every 2 years, but like that's one that I've probably listened and read 3-4 times more than any other books in the series because it's so city fight and captures the atmosphere so well.
It's kind of going street by street, cleaning it out. And I know tangentially, so my last suggestion is again in a similar vein to the Storm of Iron. It is more siegey rather than city fight-y, but it's Vrax. Because towards the end of that campaign, you do start to see them fighting within the main hold of Vrax, and that's where you start to see them cleaning out section by section, and that's where the urban warfare starts coming in a little bit. But I think any book that we do, any media we recommend, I think I'm going to recommend Vrax anyway, because it's such a great book series. Like whatever it is, it's going to be Vrax. Yes, so that's sort of like the media surrounding urban warfare that I'd want to introduce. But in the main, Enemy at the Gates, Saving Private Ryan, and Black Hawk Down would be playing on loop as I developed any project. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention. This popped into me when I was walking into work today. Video games. Metal Gear Solid 3. It's old Snake, and he is very much in an urban environment. He isn't like close away. He is in an open battleground, and you have it's just a bombed out urban environment that he's winding his way between. So if you're looking for like a video game representation, I think that is the finest version of urban warfare or stealth tactics in a game. That's unfortunately it's landlocked in the PS3 because they can't convert it over to other systems apparently. But yes, that is a really, really good. I mean, from the style, the color palette, jump online and just look at visual images of it, look at the art, look at playthroughs of it, because the other game media, I mean, that's a really good one. Can you think of any other sort of like game media?
So Dawn of War is definitely one for like sci-fi city landscapes, and it's sort of in the vein of what we'd already talked about, being World War II, but the original Company of Heroes, where you get a campaign playing through all of from the 101st Airborne's perspective through the Normandy campaign. So it's just very good city fight environments that are just all the way through it from the same perspective as we'll be playing the game on tabletop.
Yeah. Space Marine as well from the
I've
PS3 era.
I've not played it.
Amazing game. I had a bit of a breakdown a couple of years ago and decided like, I need a PS3. So I bought that Metal Gear Solid. Amazing game. And there is an upcoming Space Marine 2 game that is set in Imperial City. So lots of urban environments there. Now, I am sure that there are quite a lot of like modern warfare and other games like that, but I don't play many video games. So if our listeners have any suggestions on media to check out, movies, books, games, anything that will inspire our other readers or inspire us to create more effective city fighting themed armies or terrain, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, do you know what? I think that's a good point, because my knowledge of video games nowadays is down in the toilet. So
yeah, same. So we're taking a 2-week break because I'm away in Spain next week, unless Max can rope in a guest and you want to do an independent video. Otherwise, we'll be seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Hopefully nothing bad happens in the meantime. Or perhaps we hope something bad happens so we could talk about it on the show.
Let's go with that one. But no episode next week. I think I need to catch up on some editing because of the Melos event. So 2 weeks' time. Yeah, well, have you got anything else to add for the episode, Miles?
No.
Neither have I. I'm completely exhausted in the brain department. So
that's it. That's all you're getting.
Right. Cheers for watching.
Bye.
Bye.